Grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady La Conquistadora,
Pray for us.
St. Francis and St. Anthony,
Pray for us.
So I won't be reading the Passion. As you saw how long it was, it's the entire Passion. It begins, in fact, right at the beginning of Maundy Thursday, through the Last Supper, then the betrayal, the Garden of Gethsemane, then the betrayal, then the crucifixion. It goes all the way until the Jews asked for that the guards be placed at the tomb so that the body won't be stolen. So that's the entire Passion of our Lord. So the Passion is read 4 times during Holy Week. The church wants you to hear the entire Passion, the one time of the year in which you meditate intensely on the Passion of our Lord. We're now at the center of the holiest time of the year, which is why it's called Holy Week. Holy Week begins today. And then, of course, next Sunday is Easter Sunday, which are the fruits of our Lord's Passion. So we see today in the Gospel, both of them, and in the epistles, one, the betrayal of the Jews. So the fathers of the church bring this out in the office of today, in which Israel was given many blessings by God. In fact, in the blessing of the Palms, there's a sort of recounting of the time the palms come up in the history of the Old Testament, and also not only palms, but olive branches, because you can actually bless those too, olive branches and palms for Palm Sunday. So you have the beginning of the prayers, speaking about the little olive branch that the dove had on the Ark of Noah that was sent out, came back with an olive branch. You have the Israelites in the desert where they camped by palm trees. So all these prayers, you have 6 of them for the blessing of the palms. They recount the times when God intervenes in order to give blessings to Israel in the Old Testament. Of course, that's leading up to the final thing, which is what we're celebrating, the people taking the palm branches off of the trees and laying them at the feet of our Lord, acclaiming him king. You might ask, why then does not the church dress in another color except for violet? In the 55 rite, they changed that. In the 52, and it is also in the sort of as well. The first part of the Mass is in red, the second part in purple. Because the first part deals with the acclamation of our Lord as King, so they chose red to symbolize the kingship of our Lord. But before then, the church wore purple, as you saw, all the way through. Because of the Jews proclaim him king, the church doesn't trust it. Because they can proclaim him king today on Sunday, but Friday's put to death. So that tells you there's something strange about the acclamation of our Lord as King. They were excited, certainly, by the coming of our Lord into Jerusalem, but 6 days later they were crying out for his blood. That tells you that their conversion, their belief in our Lord is very shallow, in fact, that they could go from calling him a king to demanding him to be crucified, which was the worst punishment that you could get in the Roman Empire, to be nailed to the cross while you were still alive, and you basically died of asphyxiation. You couldn't breathe on the cross, really. So it was a terrible death. So they go from the acclamation of king to his crucifixion. And that's why you see the great sorrow the church has for the people of Israel. Because the people of Israel were given many blessings by God. He chose Abraham. He blessed the patriarchs, that is Isaac and Jacob. Then you have Joseph, the 12 sons of Israel. They go into Egypt. They become a great people. God delivers them from Egypt with many miracles. The plagues upon Egypt, which God sent upon Pharaoh so that he would allow the people to leave. And then they go to Mount Sinai. They see the mountain of God covered with clouds. They're terrified of it, in fact. They know God is there. God feeds them in the desert with manna. He sends them quail. He gives them water from out of the rock because they were thirsting. He gives them miracle after miracle. All through the Old Testament, God intervenes to deliver the people of Israel when things were very dark. And all of that, why? Because Israel was chosen to be the vessel by which the Messiah was going to come to deliver all mankind. So the entire preparation of the Old Testament is for the coming of Christ. Because Christ will arise from Israel, fulfill all the prophecies, that out of Abraham's seed, all nations would be blessed. Because, of course, our Lord, according to the flesh, is of the sons of Abraham. So he comes to fulfill all the promises, so that Israel become the means by which every man and woman and child in the world is going to be blessed and have the means to redeem their souls. And what happens? That's the great mystery. That's why the church is in purple today in the first part. Because though the Messiah comes to Israel and he performs many miracles, he raises people from the dead, they end up rejecting him. It's a terrifying thing when you read the accounts of the Passion. As I said, all during the week, all 4 Passions are going to be read. Today is the Gospel of St. Matthew's Passion. Then you're going to have, I think it's tomorrow, the Gospel of St. Mark, tomorrow, Tuesday. It's going to be Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be the Gospels of St. Mark and St. Luke. And then Friday is the Gospel of St. John, the Passion. So you get the entire Passion. But in this hearing of the Passion, you see what happens when Israel rejects the very purpose of its existence. It really is terrifying. You read in the Gospel of St. John about after Lazarus was raised from the dead. Of course, that was very close to Jerusalem. Bethany was quite close. You could walk to Bethany, to Jerusalem from Bethany. So that when the resurrection of Lazarus happened, everybody knew about it. That wasn't something people were just hiding. The entire village of Bethany heard it, and everybody in Jerusalem heard about it. And the proof that he was raised from the dead is that he was walking around. And you could just take walk several miles and you'd see Lazarus. In fact, a couple of days ago in the gospel, it talked about the people who were coming to Bethany to see our Lord, but it said also to see Lazarus, because he had been raised from the dead. So that made a huge impression, this resurrection from the dead. And how did the Pharisees react to that? It says that they want to kill Lazarus. Why do they want to kill Lazarus? Because he's the proof of our Lord's power, the proof of the resurrection. It's interesting, they don't deny he was raised from the dead. They didn't say it's a hoax. He was never dead in the first place. They don't deny he's dead. They realize he was dead, he was raised again from the dead, and their solution is simply to kill the evidence again. What kind of malice does that reveal about the Pharisees? That the Pharisees do not deny the miracle, but want the evidence taken away. They want Lazarus dead so that people will quit following our Lord. Now there you see malice. And the fruit of that malice we heard in the gospel of today is a proof of the generational curses. We just talked about that yesterday. But there's a big proof today. Because the Jews say, when they call for the crucifixion of our Lord, Pilate asks, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the Jews' reply is, "His blood be upon us and our children." And the Jews are cursed. They're cursed from that day till this day. They're under a curse till their conversion at the end of the world. It's a real curse the Jews are under. That's why Israel was taken away from them. The Romans came in AD 70 and wiped them out. There were those who were the ones still alive were taken into slavery. They built the Colosseum in Rome with the slave labor from Jerusalem, but they finally destroyed the entire city with nothing left of that place, really. As a sign that God's wrath had come upon Israel, the temple was utterly destroyed, and it's been destroyed to this day. And from the year 79 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed, until 1940, there was no Israel, no Jewish land. For almost 2,000 years, the Jews were cursed so that they would have to wander the face of the earth because they crucified God. And that's what it's very precise. It's true, you can't crucify the divinity in itself, but Christ is God. And when they put him to death, they killed the human nature of God, and which was united to the divine person. They killed God. They were guilty of the crime of deicide, a grave, grave thing. And the reaction of God was very strong. The extermination of Israel. And so that he would have to wander the face of the earth until the last times. Because one of the prophecies about before the coming of the Antichrist is that the Jews will be restored. That is, that they will get their land back. And they will try to build the temple again. That's the sign that the Antichrist is here. Because the temple will be rebuilt, and the Antichrist will enter into this new temple and proclaim himself God. And the Jews, a lot of them will bow their knee to Antichrist as the God of Israel. Though a group of them will not, and they'll convert to the faith. All the faithful Jews will convert to the Catholic religion at the end of time. But that's a really terrifying scenario. Almost 2,000 years in which Israel has lived under this curse of God. His blood be upon us and our children. And God took it seriously because they were destroyed. That same generation that crucified our Lord was the generation when it grew up was destroyed by the Romans in the first Jewish revolt in the AD 70s. So we see the wrath of God. But God did not come to destroy mankind. That was the whole purpose of the crucifixion. That's why the church, in fact, is celebrating this great Holy Week, is because our Lord undergoes his passion, but in order to open for us the gates of heaven. That's why the cross was knocked against the door at the end of the procession, to remind you that it's through the cross that heaven is opened up again. That the sacrifice of the cross was a sign of love for us. That our Lord underwent all these sufferings he foresaw from all eternity, that his own people were going to accomplish on him in order to open up the gates of heaven. The fathers of the church say that when our Lord rode into Jerusalem on the foal of an ass, that is on the foal is the baby donkey basically, or the baby mule I should say. So it was a baby mule and no one had ever ridden on it before. That was a symbol of what was to happen because of the passion. That the foal is a symbol of the Gentiles. The Gentiles had not served God after the certainly after the time of Noah, and then Abraham chosen by God, so that there's a special people preparing for the Messiah. The other nations were not serving God. They turned to idols, to false gods, to many gods. And so they were in a especially terrible way. But our Lord rides upon the foal to symbolize that upon this people that had never served God, that is the Gentiles, Christ was now to sit. He was now to rule. And Christ will rule over the Gentiles until they start to fall away. And that's when the Jews are converted at the end. And then there'll just be one people. The Jews and Gentiles will both be part of the Catholic Church. Now this curse upon the Jews doesn't mean that God utterly forsook the Jews, because through history you see the conversion of Jews. In Spain, St. Vincent Ferrer converted 100,000 Jews to the Catholic religion. That grace given to them does not mean that Jewish people weren't cursed, but that a curse given by God is not absolute on them. This curse of father to son, which is symbolized by his blood be upon us and our children. God still had mercy on some of the Jews who were spared. In every generation, God called some of the Jews to his Catholic Church. But the rest of the people were under this darkness, which they had brought upon themselves by calling upon God, that he cursed them. His blood be upon us and our children is a horrible thing. But yet, God did not forsake even Israel. And Israel will be saved at the end. So let us ask Our Lady of Sorrows today for the grace to meditate on our Lord's suffering. Our Lord undergoing all these torments in order that you can go to heaven. So the gates of heaven will be open. Because it's a great grace to be able to be saved. When the people of the Old Testament had to, even when they died and they were just, they'd go into the limbo of the fathers and wait. They couldn't enter heaven until the time of our Lord. But you are now baptized into Christ, into his Holy Catholic Church, And that enables you, if you die in the state of grace, you have the possibility of dying in the state of grace, and of heaven being open to you after your death. Eternal happiness through the cross of our Lord, through the suffering which he voluntarily undertook for your sake and for mine. Ask Our Lady of Sorrows, who suffered with her divine Son, for the grace to be faithful to him, to take up our own cross. Because even though our Lord was crucified, literally, to be a Christian means to follow in the footsteps of Christ. If you would be my disciple, our Lord says, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, not once a month or once a year, but every day. You must take up your cross daily and come follow me. But you will not carry the cross alone. Our Lord carries it with you. If you will simply accept it from his hands, he will allow this cross to be light. As our Lord says, his burden is light. That's for those who accept the cross willingly from his hands. And ask Our Lady for her intercession that she give you the desire to carry your cross, so that with her divine Son, you will enter the eternal inheritance in heaven. In the name of the Father,